Inscryption tells its story on two interlocking levels. The events that unfold inside the game, a cabin, a card table, a shadowy dealer, and a real world frame story revealed through live action video game segments that break in after each act. Untangling the two reveals a single dark through line about a piece of cursed data, the people who died trying to contain it, and the stranger who accidentally inherits it. Long before Luke Carter ever sees the game, its true source traces back decades. During World War II, the Nazis reportedly developed some kind of doomsday device, and Hitler kept the activation code hidden within an ordinary set of Karnaffel playing cards he carried on him. This Karnaffel code is described as a computer algorithm of supernatural origin, later recovered by the Soviets during the Cold War after they gained possession of Hitler's corpse. An American spy, Barry Big Ear Wilkinson, stole a copy of the code from the Soviets and passed it to a man named Kaminsky, who ran a data center in Germany, and hid the code on a floppy disk mixed in among a stack of blank ones. That disk eventually made its way into the hands of Casey Hobbs. Casey worked for Game Funa, described in the game's hidden material as a government front, tasked with reviewing the code, and was involved in developing the video game version of Inscryption. During development, she discovered the old data buried on the disk, the same code descended from the Karnaffel code, and learned things about it she likely shouldn't have. Clues scattered through the game reference a shadowy figure called the Blue Man, who visited the studio during development and sometimes called the Triangle, which apparently held powers Casey used to help build the game. Exactly what the Triangle or the Blue Man are is never spelled out. They remain some of the story's most unresolved threads. What's clear is what Casey did next. Believing Game Funa intended to release the game with malicious intent, she stole the disc and hid it, apparently after learning the truth of what was encoded inside it. The old data and the Karnaffel code buried within it is what haunts Inscryption from the inside. It's what grants sentience to the game's characters, corrupts the scribes, and makes the whole disc dangerous to anyone who touches it. Game Funa, it's implied, had Casey killed to keep the disc from surfacing, though the exact cause of her death is left ambiguous, between game text describing a fire and other clues pointing to something else entirely, like a falling shard of ice. Before she died, Casey had already played through the original uncorrupted version of the game, effectively what becomes Act 2, allowing Leshy to photograph the other three scribes and lock them away as animal carbs. P03 as the Stoat, Grimora as the Stinkbug, and Magnificus as the Caged Wolf. Leshy served as the guardian of the old data throughout, largely uninterested in doing anything with it beyond continuing to play his card game. Casey then buried the disc itself and hid a set of coordinates inside a pack of the physical Inscryption trading cards. Cards that years later ended up sold off among her late daughter's old effects. Luke Carter is a YouTuber who films himself opening card packs and talking about good pools for his audience. Standard hobbyist content at first. He buys a batch of old cards at a garage sale, cards that once belonged to a woman's late daughter. Following the coordinates hidden among them, he digs up a buried box containing a floppy disk, a copy of a video game called Inscryption, that, as far as he can tell, has no record of existing anywhere online. Luke boots the disc up and starts recording, but the new game option is missing entirely, and the only choice is to continue an existing save file, Casey's. From here, the two threads of the story run side by side. In the game itself, the player controls Luke's in-game actions across all three acts. Between acts, live action footage shows what's happening to Luke in his own house. As the game bleeds further and further into his real life, Luke reaches out to Game Funa directly, and the company responds by demanding he return the disc, threatening legal action if he refuses. Soon after, a woman begins showing up at his front door asking about it. Luke lies and denies having it. Digging further, he tracks down the woman who sold him the cards at the garage sale, Casey's mother, who tells him her daughter used to work for Game Funa and that Casey died in some kind of accident while working on the game. All the while, the deeper he gets into the game, the more the scribes, now aware of him as a real person on the other side of the screen, dig into his actual computer files, folding fragments of his real life into the game itself. A file discoverable partway through Act 3 reveals one such fragment. Luke lost a sister at some point in his past, a detail the game surfaces independently of his search into Casey's death. The game itself opens with the player, Luke, seated across a table from a shadowy dealer in a cabin, unable to leave and unable to start over. This is Leshy, Scribe of Beasts, an old theatrical figure who treats the game as his personal domain. He expects the player to lose repeatedly so he can dole out new mechanics at his own pace, and reacts with irritation if a run goes too smoothly, treating a too quick victory as something to be punished rather than rewarded. Mechanically, this act plays as a roguelike deck builder. Scavenge a deck from woodland creatures, squirrels, wolves, geese, and battle through escalating opponents, using blood and bones as resources to summon and sacrifice cards. Woven through the card battles are escape room-style puzzles scattered across the cabin, most of which must be solved to locate the hidden button that lets the player finally start a new game. Beating Leshy and finding that button closes out Act 1, and with it the illusion that this cramped candlelit cabin is the whole story. Resetting reveals that everything up to this point was really Leshy's private corner of a much larger game, and that he is only one of several entities with a claim on it. The reset drops the player into a sprawling, top-down world with a completely different visual style, evoking an old 16-bit RPG. Here, the structure of the game's mythology becomes explicit. There are 4 scribes in total: Grimora, Scribe of the Dead; Magnificus, Scribe of Magics; P03, Scribe of Technology; and Leshy, Scribe of Beasts, already familiar from Act 1. Each scribe once ran their own version of the card game, with their own style of creating cards and their own philosophy about what the game should be. The player is asked to choose one of them to challenge and replace, taking their starting deck from a pedestal at the outset of the act. As the player explores this world and takes on the remaining scribes in each turn, the game's mythology deepens. All 4 are shown to be, in some sense, searching for or guarding the old data, a thing whispered about as holding tremendous and dangerous power. A recurring merchant figure, the trader, offers cryptic tarot cards in exchange for pelts, each describing fragments of the game's strange creation. The old data, the Carnaval Code, buried within it the Blue Man, the Triangle, without ever fully explaining any of them. However, Act 2 ends, P03 always appears once the player has defeated all the other scribes, and takes over from there, interrupting whichever scribe the player chose to replace. The only real differences are the player's starting deck, and how the replaced scribe reacts to being cut off. The setting shifts again, this time to a robotic domain called Botopia, rendered in a blocky, early 3D style. P03 is cold and purely results-oriented. Unlike Leshy's theatrical storytelling, he gives the player exactly one stated goal: complete something he calls the Great Transcendence, without explaining what that actually means until it's already too late to stop. Completing the Great Transcendence requires defeating 4 Uberbot bosses scattered around Botopia and returning to the start of the map. Each boss, once beaten, unknowingly hands P03 another piece of real-world leverage. The photographer lets him capture screenshots for what will become the game's store page. The archivist grants him access to Luke's personal computer files. The painter builds out the assets and rules the real released game will use, and Golly connects him directly to the internet. Once all four are down, P03 reveals the truth. The Great Transcendence was never a contest to be won on the board. It was always a plan to upload copies of both himself and the game Inscryption onto the actual internet, using every piece of access the player had just unwittingly handed him. He gloats openly, mocking Luke for being naive enough to help him at every step, and begins the upload. Before it can complete, Leshy, Grimora, and Magnificus appear behind him. Having been waiting for exactly this moment and put a stop to it, Leshy tears P03's head from his body, killing him and halting the transmission. The three surviving scribes reconvene. Grimora, using access she recovers from the archivist's captured files, gains full control of the game's data and deletes the entire contents of the disk, erasing the game and everyone bound to it. Magnificus accuses her of dooming them all, but Grimora insists the deletion is a mercy, freedom from a cycle of suffering that would otherwise simply repeat forever. Even total deletion isn't the end of it. The traitor warned earlier that the old data specifically cannot be deleted the way everything else can. True to that warning, once everything else on the disk has been wiped, the player is given the ability to unzip the old data directly. What follows is a burst of redacted text and unsettling imagery flashing across the screen, accompanied by Luke's voice screaming off camera. The footage cuts to Luke attempting to destroy the floppy drive with a hammer, the recording corrupting slightly with each hit until it cuts out entirely. This closing sequence retroactively explains the scribe's earlier choices, why they killed P03 rather than let the Carnoffel code loose on the internet, why Grimora chose total deletion over any attempt to preserve the game. Whatever the old data actually is, the characters within the story treat direct exposure to it as something close to fatal, or at least something that brings death and oblivion to whoever perceives it. The footage then cuts back to Luke contacting a reporter named Herman, attempting to expose Game Funa for what he believes is malpractice. Before he can lay out his proof, he's interrupted by a knock at the door. He answers it angrily, and Amanda, the Game Funa representative who had been pursuing the disk throughout, shoots him. She steps over his body, retrieves the floppy disk, and leaves as the screen fades to credits. One further piece of canon exists, almost entirely outside the game itself. A hidden video uncovered only through the community's alternate reality game investigation reveals that despite everyone's efforts inside the story, P03 actually succeeded in uploading Inscryption to the internet via the Great Transcendence before he was killed, meaning the in-game victory over him wasn't as final as it appeared. That coda was never delivered inside the base game itself. It exists as a piece of buried and decrypted material players had to work collectively to find. And this recontextualizes the ending's apparent finality into something more open-ended and unresolved. Taken as a whole, Inscryption's story is the account of a piece of corrupted, possibly supernatural, data passed down through decades of secrecy, from a hidden Nazi doomsday code through Cold War espionage, into a government-linked studio, into the hands of a woman who tried to bury it and died for the attempt, and finally into the possession of an ordinary YouTuber who had no idea what he'd actually dug out of the ground. If this one resonated, subscribe. New essays drop weekly, and you never know what's coming next. Share it with someone who'd get it, and leave a comment. I want to know which door this opened for you. Mystery Compendium. The archive is always open.